Welcome, everybody, to the Killjoys Season 3 Podcasters Roundtable. In this discussion, we're going to be talking about some of the occurrences in Season 3 of Killjoys, what we thought about them, and then we will move into speculation of Season 4, what we might see coming up in Season 4, questions that we want answered, follow up on storylines that might have been introduced in Season 3 or maybe even before. We have a panel of about 4 of us today. About 4 of us. I think we're all whole people. There are 4 of us.
I mean, I'm only like 3/4 here, so.
That's fair. That's fair. So, Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself to our folks?
Sure. My name is Kevin Batchelder. I talk about Killjoys along with many other shows on our Tuning It to Sci-Fi TV podcasts.
Hi, I'm Mark DeCote, and I'm the host of The Warrant is All, the Killjoys podcast, which you can find at solotalkmedia.com.
And my name is Kris, and I co-host The Quad, a Killjoys podcast, along with Stephanie.
Which is me. I am Stephanie. I'm also on The Quad, the Killjoys podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I'm really excited we got to get some different perspectives on here. So let's start with what I feel like was a really big wowzers type of moment for me in this season, was the reveal of how Dutch and Anila were connected to each other. This is something that has kind of been teased since Season 2, and I just was not expecting where they went with it. So Mark, what did you think about that reveal?
When you say not expecting, I think that's a little bit of an understatement. To find out that, you know, the speculations going through season, well, since we heard about Anila, speculations are twins and clones and mirror image from maybe an alternate universe. But the fact that Dutch is Anila, that was pulled out of one of Anila's memories, I never saw that coming. I've never seen that in sci-fi that I can think of. So it was a little bit mind-blowing, and not just mind-blowing, but a little bit hard to comprehend. I know in my podcast, people were sending in feedback, and they didn't quite understand. Like, okay, we think we get it, but we're not sure. But I have to say, personally, I loved the whole idea behind it just because it's something new and fresh and something we've never seen before. So kudos to them to think up this idea. But some of the implications of Dutch being Anila were, again, completely left up to speculation. Dutch thinking that if she kills Anila, she will die. I personally don't see it that way, but anyways, I don't want to take over the whole podcast, but there's just so many directions this story can go with that I can't wait for Season 4 and Season 5 to follow that path and just see what happens between the two and how that story progresses.
How about you, Kevin? What did you think about that reveal?
Well, similar to Mark, actually, I've been a genre TV fan for a long, long time and watched a lot of shows, and I was also like, WTF? This was not what I expected. Like Mark said, clones, twins, sisters, all these other things might have run through my head at some point. But I watched that episode with that reveal, and I got to say, even for me, I was dumbfounded to a certain degree and had to go back and watch it again, which I often like to do with Killjoys because we get such layered stuff and such detail. But I got to admit, I didn't totally follow it. I looked forward that week to talking on our podcasts with my friends Brent and Wendy because I'm like, okay, what happened? What does this mean? Where are we going with this? So I was fascinated by it, and I got to give them major props for finding another way to do it, and also leading into the next season, which I'll save some thoughts till later. But what does this truly mean, aside from a cool aspect of sci-fi? It's going to have some other meaning to it, and that's what I'm fascinated by.
How about you, Kris?
As everybody's already said, I kind of had a reaction along the lines of, what? And that was immediately followed by, this is amazing. And I was basically borderline giddy for the rest of that episode because I watch a lot of sci-fi stuff, like a lot. And I've read sci-fi. I mean, I've grown up with it. It's been several decades of sci-fi for me. And I also can't think of this being a plot I've seen before. And it's very exciting to me that it's something I didn't see coming, but that still makes sense in a weird way, because it's sci-fi. They can do this. It's fine. But it just mind-blowing, like jaw-dropping, mind-blowing. It was great. It was very exciting for me.
I feel like in regards to the storyline, you know, we all watch a lot of sci-fi television. We all know that we're going into these shows having to suspend our disbelief a certain amount and things like that. But there are some moments watching sci-fi, at least for me, where I think, I don't know that I can go there. I feel like you haven't set up the foundation for it, or something just makes me go, hang on, I don't think I can make this leap. Alien, sure, but this thing doing this, no. But I
to
didn't
be fair,
have
you
that
don't really
reaction.
like aliens either.
Well, that's fair. But I didn't have that reaction to this reveal, and it sounds like y'all didn't either. Is that fair, Kris?
Yes. It's like, it's a weird combination of, this is so out there, no wonder it isn't a common plot. But also, I feel like the way they'd set up this story for the past 2 seasons, it took them 2.5 seasons to get here, and I feel like it paid off.
The funny thing for me on it too is I got to say at first I wasn't negative on it, but I'm like, okay, this is just too mind blowing. This fun little romp of a show, which is what I used to think of it as for a while, is now getting very deep and making me think a lot. And not that I don't like that, but it was beyond what I was expecting. So I got to say at first it kind of even threw me for I'm not sure I like this thing. But as the whole season then finished out from there, and as we are going to talk about, the implications of what this could mean, it's fascinating. I'm not sure, like you said, though, Stephanie, I totally can buy this idea of being pulled from a memory. But for this show and for what we've seen up till now, because now we go back and think about some of the early parts of season 1 even, and some of the Klein stuff that we were seeing from Dutch's, reflections now, makes this even more fascinating on a rewatch.
For sure.
So speaking of Klein, I thought this was kind of a clever way to bring back that character who died at the end of season 2, but in a way that didn't feel like a cheat. Mark, what did you think about how they incorporated Klein into this season?
Well, I honestly say the first time I saw him, I didn't understand. Like, I understood when Anila was going into her memories and she saw him, and I thought, oh, what a great way to bring him back because he's in this memory. But then for what really blew my mind is when they started, when at the end, jumping right to the end of the season where Anila and Dutch both go in and they're interacting with him. And that's the real mind-blowing thing about the whole going into the green, into the memories, is that it's not just a memory. They're not just spectators. They're able to interact. And to have Klein in there, yes, he's not alive. Their quote-unquote father is dead, but in this memory, they're able to interact, they're able to talk, and they admit, they know that this isn't really Klein, but I don't understand what he is. Because Anila says this isn't him, but if it's a memory of him, does that not make it Klein in the memory, or is it somebody else? And that's something we're going to have to wait till next season to find out exactly what this person that they're interacting with, who he actually is. But again, it's mind-blowing, the whole concept behind it.
But along that line, does this not mean, at least in my head, that if this world, and we're kind of jumping to our season 4 spec, is, I hate to use the word memories because it's almost like somehow it's their essence or their entity of these people there. So does this mean we're going to be able to see other characters, some of which we've lost, and some other ones maybe interact differently here? I don't, I am literally now scratching my head.
There's so much for this fun little romp of a show, eh, Kevin?
Yeah, and that's really what it is for me. And I had to be very honest with myself when I was, like I say, a little, thrown off. Aside from a cool aspect, thrown off was like my little show. It's not just this fun thing anymore. And I had to kind of look at the show a little differently. And it has me very interested in maybe trying to find some time to do a full rewatch before season 4 for that reason. Because some of the stuff I might have just been only going, cool little romp, is now might have been some early laying of some groundwork for some stuff that might now deal with where they're going to go.
Honestly, Kevin, I haven't thought of the show as a fun little romp since about episode 5 of season 1.
It got pretty heavy in season 1. Yeah, that's true.
It did.
Well, there definitely is some there, but I don't know. Just for me, it was always in my viewings of shows, all of us, and you talked about it too, Kris and Mark and everybody else. We watch so many shows. Sometimes you just, even subconsciously, I will categorize a show a certain way. And to me, Killjoys kind of started out on that fun side. Not that it didn't get serious in season 1, but I still kind of always looked at it as my, it's a show. It's building a universe. It's building some things, but it was still more on the fun side. And that's actually one of the things in season 3, when we were talking about on our podcast, is I missed a little bit. I didn't think we had quite as much fun in season 3 as some earlier seasons. So,
yeah, we're not used to having sci-fi that has those comedic elements, those one-liners, those zingers that, bring a chuckle. And that's what makes Killjoys, as Kevin said, lighthearted compared to a show like Dark Matter that was airing, RIP, but a show like Dark Matter where, yeah, they might have had a few little comedic moments, but it wasn't ingrained into the show, where with Killjoys, just the characters themselves. You get the two Jacoby brothers together, and there's going to be some fun banter between the two of them, and that's what makes Killjoy lighthearted. Even though they could go on a dark path, they could go on a serious adventure, you're always going to get that lighthearted banter that goes between all characters.
Yeah, I feel like what maybe made season 3 perhaps feel a little less fun than previous seasons is I feel like because of the really tightly woven plot structure they were exploring with preparing for the war with the Hullen, there were fewer sort of capers of the week type of episodes. And I think that's where a lot of the fun comes in, is where, they have this plan and then something goes wrong and they have to adapt and change what they're going to do. The stakes were a lot higher this season, which I think maybe makes it a bit more serious feeling. But I have to say that did not, it changed the tone of the show, I think, but I enjoyed it still quite a bit. But going back to what you were saying about Klein, Mark, about the whole Anila thinking it's not Klein versus Dutch saying it was Klein, I got the impression, which I could be wrong, that when we see her first, and by her I mean Anila, interacting with Klein in the green space and she realizes it's not him, I really do think that wasn't supposed to be him.
But rather the lady in disguise.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the finale, I got the impression that that was actually the true memory of Klein that exists in the green space.
Same here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
now I might have my little head going again.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. He's not really who I think he is because, yeah, this whole aspect of the lady and where did the two of them go when they went in? I mean, where did they physically go? I mean, they aren't just sitting in the green goo there in the spaceship. I mean, that's the other aspect.
One would hope not. They would drown.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
Would they?
But would they? Yeah.
We don't actually know what the goo is.
No, that's the other aspect to this. It's because it's doing a great job of blowing up all of our preconceptions about a lot of things we've seen in sci-fi. It's not like they went to another dimension, another world, another portal. We can joke about it, but we all know what those things are because we watch so much sci-fi. With this one, we still don't even know enough about this. I mean, maybe that's going to be played out early in the next season, but I'm not saying I don't like it, but I'm definitely in a very uncomfortable place because I don't feel like I know what's going on as much as I used to.
Did you have anything you wanted to add about Klein, Kris?
Oh, just that this whole premise is actually pretty exciting for me just because it's something that a lot of sci-fi touches on, this notion of like what makes a person, right? Because a lot of things, it seems like, kind of come down to, are we our memories, like the sum of our memories or the sum of our thoughts, that sort of idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like this is sort of an interesting way to approach that. Like, does Klein continue to actually exist in the form of his memories that are in the green?
I feel like it's possible they might touch on this idea of, that's kind of been introduced, I think, in Caprica is the show that comes to mind first, but, could we create a digital memory of somebody? Is there some way to encapsulate how a person is and existed in some sort of form that we could then interact with after their death. It kind of reminds me a bit of that idea that has been explored some in sci-fi.
I was actually thinking of the final season of Person of Interest.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or even Dollhouse.
Yep.
Same ideas.
And I'm with you. I forget who said it now, if it was Kevin or if it was Mark, that I like the idea of potentially seeing characters that we've lost, like Alvis this season or Potter from last season, maybe seeing them again because of the green space.
But then it wouldn't really necessarily be them because neither of them had actually put their memories into the green.
But neither did Dutch.
But Dutch's memories are now in the green, and she has memories of them.
So memories of memories.
Yeah. So it's like, will that count? I don't know. That is something that they could play with if they wanted to. I think it's a fertile ground for the writers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, are we going to put out like a recap or a Bible or something those of us can read going in to have an idea? Because I'm and not in a negative way, but like I say, I'm going to have to see how we create the foundation so I feel like I understand it, so that I don't feel like, as we all know in many shows, sometimes if there's an easy reset button or a way that, the stakes aren't real. And I'm just, I won't say concerned, but I'm wondering that I want to make sure this is a situation where, while it would be cool to see some of those characters that we love not around, if it turns into, hey, anybody can show up at any time, then this doesn't have quite the same stakes that it's now earned in the last, certainly, season or so.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's move on to talk a bit about how Anila was integrated into this season, because it was kind of a surprising choice that they made, I think. We had Delsea, who I never really thought she was dead at the end of season 2 because we didn't see her die. She just was wounded. But I really did not expect her to have the expanded role that she did in season 3. And, she really served as a bridge between characters that we know in a world that we know to this new world up on Anila's ship and introducing us to this new character. So I'm kind of curious how y'all felt about the Delsea storyline and her connection with Anila. Kevin, why don't we start with you?
Well, Delsea is just such a fun character. I mean, getting to see her back made for a lot of fun. Same idea as we were seeing things developed. It seemed very Delsea-like, that she's taking a situation and trying to, get advantage of it, not understanding, just how out there Anila was. So I enjoyed that. I mean, the pregnancy part of it, that was definitely another WTF moment for me. And that's going to have some ripple effects, obviously, going forward to next season, too. So I was looking forward to this year, and I'm not saying it was a dud, but maybe not quite as much fireworks as I thought when, she and Johnny finally had to have some chats after what he did to her. So I'm wondering if that's going to still keep going forward, or if they really kind of been able to put that behind them. I don't know.
Well, my take on the whole thing, first of all, the pregnancy, that I'm sure was a surprise for the writers, because Mako Nguyen was actually pregnant. And I remember seeing on an interview she did, I forget where, but anyways, she was talking where she thought she was going to be written out. Like, she was told she was coming back for this season, but when she got pregnant, she thought she was going to be written out of the show because of the pregnancy. But then they decided to work it in. So they reworked their storyline specifically around her being pregnant. So that was interesting, especially the first few episodes where they were never showing her belly. They were always showing her from basically the chest up. And I think it was a good job that they did. But the whole idea, what gets me is the whole idea that it's Davins. And I know we're going to touch on him a little bit later in the podcast, but just that's what really blows my mind in this part, is that the baby is Davins, and how that plays into the whole story, what the repercussions in the following seasons are going to be because of that, and just how they interacted, and how Davin's interaction with the green and everything that has to do with him. And anyways, we're going to talk more on Davin later. But the other thing about Delsea that was one thing that I didn't catch, or I didn't understand, was in the story she said that she survived Johnny's shooting because there was a facility that Klein had set up where they were that was where he was supposed to transform her into Hullen. Well, in my mind, if if Klein set up a facility on Westerly, wouldn't he have used the green from Arkin to do that? And since the green from Arkin had been destroyed, how was she able to transform herself into a Hullen unless they had green from other places as well? It just, in my mind, a facility set up on Westerly would have used Arkin green. So that was one of those things that was never really touched on, but I was kind of went, huh, really? Didn't make sense to me that he would have imported green from somewhere else, unless the Arkin green is not the type of green that was used for the whatever they said. There was two different Hullens, the leaders and the followers. So unless that's the case, that Arkin green was only for followers, but I don't know.
What I thought was so interesting about Delcea's story this season, I mean, it stays true to Delcea's character. You know what I mean? Like, all of this stuff makes complete sense to me. She would show up clearly in a lower position someplace else, and she'd try to start bossing people around. Like, that makes sense to me. That seems like Delcea. And then upon finding out that that's not the case, she tries to manipulate the situation so that that is the way things are. And also, she has that first encounter with Anila, and I'm like, oh, this is entirely too perfect. This is probably heaven for Delcea. It's Dutch, but she's a lot just more horrible. Which seems like it would be something Delcea would be into, and I was right.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder if that was something that the writers, I don't know, if that was part of the reason why they decided to use Delcea like this, because we are not the only people, I think, who have noticed the frisson, the tension between Dutch and Delcea in their previous scenes. But obviously, I don't think that was a pairing that they would probably explore on the show. But now you have the same actress, but in a different role, and she's more horrible. And oh, this looks like an opportunity.
Somebody more open to Delcea's advances.
Yeah.
And I still want to understand the whole idea that Davin could be the father. Or, I mean, again, are we now going to go into this whole, the connection to the green, the connection to Anila? I mean, what is that going to mean? Because, it's very obvious that's not your traditional pregnancy. We know that by now. And what is that going to mean for the whole possibility of again, this foundation? Because, right? I mean, this isn't as simple as artificial insemination or something, right? I mean, there's got to be something else at play here.
Hmm. Yeah, Kris, you didn't really talk much about the pregnancy storyline. Did you have thoughts on that?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not anything that anyone didn't say already, I guess. I don't know.
I don't love the whole mystical pregnancy storyline generally, but I do think the fact that it's Davin's and sort of what that says about his connection to the green and stuff like that, I do think that makes it interesting.
Yeah. I also, thinking about it more, it's like, I kind of wonder if this is going to lead to, like, season 5, 3 Killjoys and a baby. You know what I mean? Like, it would be kind of great. Like, this would be an easy way to bring those two groups of characters together. And
but
force them to interact in a not overtly hostile way.
But do you really think they're going to have Delcea running around with a baby?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be 3 Killjoys and a little lady, though. Obscure sequel reference.
I mean, the possibility of finding a way to have them have to work with Delcea is just ripe with lines and scenes and stuff that we're all probably wringing our hands at. But I just don't think the baby part can somehow fit in. I think they have to find a way to move that to the side a bit.
I mean, they've already established accelerated aging, right? I mean, the baby is gestating at an abnormal rate. So I'm joking about the little lady part, but also I'm not joking about it because it could be where this is headed. Instead of flash forwarding, it could just be that the baby becomes a toddler or child or something, which still wouldn't necessarily be great, but it would be less awkward, perhaps, than a baby. I don't know.
I mean, we've all heard about, the terrible twos and everything else, but can you just imagine Delcea as a child? And how that would be? That's not someone I'd want to be babysitting. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, as a mother, you mean?
No, if the child has her personality.
Oh, okay.
Children are
kind of acts
challenging
like
up.
a demanding toddler now.
That's
so.
what I'm saying. So, bring it down to less control over what happens, and I could just see some epic, fits and outbursts, and who knows if that child has some other powers, too.
It's terrifying, Kevin.
Yes, it is. But I can see the writers going, oh, wouldn't this not be fun to write?
I was just going to say the rapid aging thing. I mean, we've seen it in other shows. They did it with Tamsin in Lost Girl, where, a young girl grew up real quick. And so they could do something so that we don't have this baby. Because, the cliche thing with babies is once you introduce a baby into the show, that pretty well kills it. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is something like that, especially with how fast the pregnancy progressed. So I wouldn't put it past them doing something like that where the baby is born and then next thing you know, young adult and so forth.
What about you, Stephanie? What are your thoughts?
I am super skeptical of the pregnancy thing. I just don't know. I don't know how they can do it that it would not annoy me, but we shall see.
I would have been curious to know what the story would have been because they changed the storyline in order to accommodate Meiko Nguyen's pregnancy. So what would the storyline have been if she hadn't have been pregnant? Because obviously they had some sort of story. They knew what they were going to do for season 3, and they had to alter it. So
I would assume it would be a similar building of the relationship between her and Anila throughout the season. And maybe they just sort of added the whole, we could sort of bring Davin and his resistance to the green factor into this and make it kind of interesting. But that is a good question. What if they deleted a section of story to make room for the pregnancy?
Yeah, and whether that story might come back in season 4 or 5, too, if it's a really good part of things.
Yeah. And I started thinking in my head, but this just all sounds terrible, which is why I'm super skeptical of the pregnancy storyline. Is because they've established that killing sources of the green can decolonize people and things like that. Could that be a way to, I try to put a gentler way to say this, but could that be a way to shuffle the baby away so it's not a factor anymore? I don't know. I don't know that I would like that. That sounds really depressing. But there is that sort of question hanging there as if something happens to the Hullen or something happens to Anila or the green source or what have you, could that be a factor in the pregnancy storyline?
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question, too. What, as has already been mentioned, how did they create this baby? What goo did they use? What green... I know. I heard it as soon as I said it.
Gross.
I know. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's see where we go on this rabbit hole.
No. Undo. What green source did they use? Because, I don't know. I'm so confused now. I shouldn't think about it is really the problem.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably best if we just let them figure it out for us because we're just going to hurt ourselves.
It's true.
Much as we did with the source of Dutch. Just, make all sorts of wrong guesses.
Yep. So we've touched on Davin a bit already, and let's talk a little bit more about his story arc this season. Mark, what were your thoughts on Davin and how his role sort of shifted this season?
Confused. I still don't know. When you look at Davin as a whole, his character really hasn't changed from season 1 and 2. He's become a little bit more confident. He's ingrained himself more into the Killjoy lifestyle. But the mysteries surrounding him, we're getting more and more mysteries. But so far, we haven't really gotten any answers. And how he's rejecting the green, how he's able to do stuff that, as it was said in one of the episodes, that the only other person that's ever been able to affect another Hullen like that is Anila. And so how is he able to do that without being a Hullen? And we don't know. We know stuff that's happened going back to season 1, where there was the nanites and there was the stuff with his brain, and was all that interconnected in order to create the Davin that we have now? And how is it affecting him? His memory losses, where he doesn't remember going to that planet to get that ball thing that Klein had left behind. He doesn't remember doing that. He doesn't remember taking the ship. He doesn't remember that he can control the ship, or how does he control the ship? Did Klein do anything to him? We know back on Arkin, he rejected the green, but was there other stuff done to him there that we don't know? And it's very fascinating, but usually when you go through a series like this, you'll get a question, answer, question, answer. And I find that with Davin's character, we're not getting any of those answers. And I'm not complaining. Don't take that wrong. I'm not complaining. It's very fascinating, but I'm just wondering when we're going to start. Like, are we going to get them in season 4, or do we have to wait till season 5 to finally get the payoff on all of this? And as Kevin said, if we go back and watch from season 1, are we going to start picking up little things that we might have missed back then, or we might have just brushed off? And are they going to pay off more as we keep going to find out Davin's whole story? So it's something that I keep racking my brain around is what is up with him, and we're not getting those answers. And in a way, I'm loving it. It makes me anticipate season 4 even more, because I really want to know what's going on with him.
It does seem like we're getting about 1 or 2 answers for every, 2 or 3 or 4 questions.
Well, what answers are we getting?
Well, but I mean, the fact that we know that there was stuff done to his brain, and the fact that we know Klein is involved somehow. We don't know if Klein is the one who did it to him. We don't know what it was that Klein knew, but we knew that Klein must have known something, because it seems like Klein is the one who led them to Davin. So now I'm just kind of like, did Klein somehow set up this whole thing? Since Davin is Johnny's brother, did Klein somehow set up Johnny meeting Dutch?
See, more questions.
Klein has definitely emerged as a bit of a puppet master in this whole thing. He seems to be 12 steps ahead of everybody.
But if Klein was the one behind it, that means Klein is ultimately responsible for Davin turning on his squad and killing his army or whatever military, his teammate. So is that what you're saying? It's possible that Klein was responsible for that happening?
I don't know. Because there's that aspect of the storyline, and I'm not sure still whether or not that is necessarily related to his interaction with the green.
See,
it seems likely unrelated, but who knows? I'm sorry, Kevin.
No, that's okay. I mean, my thought, again, we're all subject to being very wrong, was that I'm viewing Klein at this point, with what we've seen play out so far through the end of the season, when it comes to Davin, as seeing an opportunity. Because didn't he set up and go back to torture and interrogate his father to try to find out more about why he had this special connection?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure he's the puppet master of Davin from way back, but maybe seeing an opportunity that I can do something with him. He can play a part in my bigger plan. So, as Mark said, that we just have a bunch of questions for him, which, again, as a viewer, I'm like, okay, you frustrated me, but thank you, because that just makes me more engaged with the show now to want to know to want to know what it is. So I really took this season for Davin, not that I disliked him in any way the first couple, but he was just kind of there. It was much more the Johnny and Dutch show to me. So this is a great sign of a show maturing is, not that they didn't have great stuff this season, but Davin was a lot more out in front on some of this stuff. So it was nice to see. We've really built up the team of all 3 of them instead of just calling it a team, with Davin kind of being definitely number 3. So that I've enjoyed. I'm not sure, I think it was you, Mark, that said, I'm not, sure it very much was in character, some of the things that he was doing, but the fact that he couldn't remember these things, or he has that ability with the ships that we have no idea where it came from, and he has memory lapses or whatever. I think we're definitely going to see, be it season 4 or 5, a lot more on that. Whether or not that comes to be a benefit for our team, or if things start to spin and Davin somehow, I won't say becomes a bad guy, but because of a lot of what he's been involved in or has been touched by, he becomes more of a problem than a helper.
I need to rewatch season 2, but Yeah, I do think I agree with you, Kevin. Like, I liked Davin in seasons 1 and 2, but in season 3, I really started to love Davin. It's like, aw, Davin's such a solid dude.
And he got some of the best lines of the season too. I mean, so it was great to see the actor get to be, a lot more, like I say, engaged. I mean, it just, he was more than just filling screen space for me. Certainly, come this season.
Mm-hmm.
It felt to me like Johnny's absence at the beginning of season 2 maybe helped push Davin into that role, because it really solidified his and Dutch's relationship as partners working together, which I think maybe helped lead to him being able to kind of take control of the resistance when he had to relieve Torin of his duties. And I thought that was interesting, especially at the beginning of the season when he was kind of giving Johnny advice about, this is what happens when you screw up and you have to come back and you have to fit back in. It's terrible, but you got to do it. So did y'all have thoughts about Johnny's storyline and his interactions with Davin and sort of the trio and that whole situation when they were kind of getting back into gear at the beginning of the season? Kris?
I found it very enjoyable. As you said, I liked that aspect of it, that it's not like they resented Johnny for it. They weren't mad at him. They understood, but at the same time, stuff is different now. We have to get through it. We have to figure out the new dynamic of the team now that stuff has kind of shifted while he was gone. I don't know. I appreciate how realistic they are with that aspect of things. Like, I feel like they're very good about realistic human interactions. Unlike, your more quote unquote realistic dramas, right? Where it's just kind of like, people would not have this conversation, or alternatively, more frequently, really, on the other shows, like, those conversations are just not had.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing I really appreciate about Killjoys, is they will address these things. Like, yes, stuff is weird now, and we're going to get through it because we love each other. And I don't know. I just think it's nice.
Well, I'm also fascinated by, and again, I think this, as you kind of said too, Kris, that the rewatch value of the entire set of episodes that we've had so far, all 3 seasons, because I got to say, I wasn't a huge fan early this season with not having Johnny around, and some other things that happened with some other characters, in that I thought we kind of like, I wanted to hit the ground running. Again, Kevin wants, rather than what the reality show is, the caper of the week, and all 3 of them kicking butt and doing something, and we kind of didn't have it because we got more realistic development of those characters. So I think in total it's awesome, because if I rewatch now coming into the beginning of the season, I can be ready for that being there rather than being hit by it at first, and then eventually seeing how much it developed for Dav very much over the course of the whole season. So again, it's a great job of the show not becoming routine and falling into the same things that we might all expect. But as a viewer, it kept throwing me off, and I kept shaking my fist and saying thank you at the same time, because I got to enjoy it more. But I also think I was missing some of it, because without Johnny around, it did make them, I think, have to deal with stuff more and let those characters step up a bit. And then we had to have them deal a little bit with, once he's back, that it's just not a big hug and everything's okay. There are repercussions to it. But it's the natural flow. And as you talk about, unlike other shows, for me, the reason I identify so much with Killjoys and maybe have trouble with some other shows, and don't throw anything at me, Mark, but I'm thinking of The Expanse, is, no, and not in a negative way, it's just I feel so much more engaged with these characters. It's like they're my friends, so I'm concerned when stuff happens for them rather than just watching at a distance as something happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, my take on the whole Johnny thing this season is, when we started off the season, I enjoyed the Johnny side of the story, and it was a lot of fun. I could understand what he was going through. He had to get away after the death of Potter and after him shooting Delsea, which he thought he had killed. So I understood that. But when you look at the season as a whole, other than the fact that they needed Dutch and Davin to become closer, there was really no reason for Johnny to be gone. We didn't get the payoff, and we might get the payoffs in season 4 and 5, but I was really expecting, like, we're going to talk more about the hack mods in a bit, but Johnny went off, discovered this whole world, became a hack mod with his awesome laser finger, but that never paid off towards the end of the season. Like, when he left them, and they even said, like, we're here for you if you ever need us. Well, why didn't they call them in? So to me, that whole beginning story with Johnny, I had a lot of fun watching it. I enjoyed watching it. But as I said, if you look at the season as a whole, I found that it really degrades that part of the story because there was no payoff, which may come later on. Now, and not to mention the whole part with Johnny being able to find almost every plasma pool out there, and not telling us how he was doing it. I don't get that, because to me, the Hullen, these plasma pools are supposed to be sacred and big secret. How did he, like, within, I don't remember how long he was gone, even if, a few months or whatever, how did he find every single or just about every single plasma pool out there when the Hullen are supposed to be keeping these things secret? So that was something I was kind of like, really? He found them all from that one place while he was there with Ollie and that. But then when he came back, I really liked the whole interaction when he came back to Team Awesome Force, only to find out he had been replaced by Zeph. And he had to almost find his new role with the team. He was taking back his place, but some of his job was now being circumvented because Zeph was there taking over stuff, and the butting heads, which I love the butting heads between Johnny and Zeph. But I really like that part of the story. Him coming back, him not just being accepted with open arms and everything was back to normal, like we see in so many other shows. Somebody's gone, they come back, and poof, everything's back to normal. It took the whole season for him to integrate himself back into Team Awesome Force the way he was before. So I like that part, where the end of the season with him coming back. But I find the beginning where he was gone was just, it didn't pay off enough, in my opinion. Again, only when you look at the season as a whole.
It's my understanding in regards to Johnny finding the plasma pools that it wasn't that he and Clara / Ollie were just stationary while they were gone. I think they were traveling around a lot. So I don't think they were just in one spot. And as far as like how he found them, I think that's a little bit of just, we got to accept that Johnny made some fancy dancy sensors and he sent them out, and they could test for whatever the various things he tests for a lot on the show. So I think that just requires probably a little okay, that happened, sure.
A little sciencey hand waving.
Exactly. Science. But I agree with you. I liked the hack mod storyline a lot, but while I do really think we're going to get more from them in subsequent seasons, just because this was something they introduced back in season 2, the idea of the hack mods, I do wish that they had brought them back later in the season as well.
No, I think we're all, if I may guess, on the same page that it's some reference to them, some quick scene, some little help in some battle to let us kind of know they were still there, I think would have been enough, knowing we could have a little more. They didn't have to come back and be the reason for it, but to have nothing was probably the part that all of us kind of went, oh, that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
The thing is, the season ended with them having this war start, only to realize that this is a very small thing that is now blown into a much bigger thing that they really weren't at all prepared for. And so I'm like, maybe this is setting up their return for the bigger battle next season.
Mm-hmm.
They expand their resistance force even farther.
Yes. And
maybe, since it's going to take another whole season for him to come back, that might in some way open the door for Clara? ...
I don't know.
Come on, folks, help me out here.
Do you just miss Stephanie Leonidas, Kevin?
Yes. I was so looking forward to that.
I would love to have her back, but I don't think at this point we will. Like, especially with the way Ollie kind of embraced who she is now in this. We only saw her for 2 episodes, but she embraced who she's become. I don't think we're going to get Clara back personally. I mean, I would love to have her back. I mean, the actress, I love her, but I don't think we're going to see it.
Plus, how do you undo that process?
Yes.
I would think it would
It's
be
sci-fi. It's sci-fi. We can figure it out.
Kevin is like encouraging the sciencey hand waving at this point.
We already have some of it. What's another hand wave if we have to? And I think it'd be even cooler if we had found a way to somehow have both Clara and Ollie, because I liked Ollie. It wasn't a dislike of Ollie. It's just, as you said, Mark, the actress, and I certainly, like I think a lot of fans that got so excited that we were going to have Clara kind of to kick butt with the team early this season. It had to be a little disappointing. And it's the reality of shooting TV, and we've talked about it a little bit with the Delsea pregnancy. I mean, we can all play the what ifs, but producers and writers, I mean, they do a great job of finding a way to make it all work when you have availability issues or major changes like that are important. So I get it. It's interesting to watch it flow.
So we've talked a little bit about Johnny and Davin's sort of separate storylines. Did we want to maybe talk a bit about their different interactions with Dutch? Kevin, I feel like you might have some things to say about Dutch and Johnny.
I mean, the Dutch and Johnny stuff is just gold. I mean, I love that. So that's probably part of why, certainly when he wasn't around at the beginning of this season, that it made me appreciate him more. I mean, not that I didn't, but it's like anything else in life. When something you're used to having isn't there for some reason, you can appreciate it more. So I love the fact that the team part of it, like I said, to me, season 1 and 2 was very much Johnny and Dutch out ahead of Dav. I think we can all agree on that. So having Dav develop this year and having Johnny be missing for a while is making me even more excited for what's to come when the three of them are Team Awesome Force on a much more even level. Because I also thought this season, too, at least for me, that with all of Dutch's concern about what was going on with Anila, I don't want to say she came down a peg, but she wasn't quite as indestructible as I thought she might have been myself early in the show. So it certainly, it made them a lot more of a fairly even level team. They each have their skill sets. You talked about it, Mark, too, a little bit with Zeph and Johnny kind of getting, like a lot of us have probably had in life when you change jobs or something major changes, you realize you're not quite the cat's meow anymore. There are other people that can do some things you can. So you change your relationship with people sometimes. And that's what you were talking about, Kris, a little earlier, in that it makes it much more real. The relationships of these characters now are much more real to me. Not that they weren't early, but the foundation is now that much stronger. So I, certainly love the Johnny and Dutch stuff this season, but it wasn't as important as some other stuff that developed, so it had to take a little back seat.
I just love the one thing with the Johnny and Dutch was when they were communicating via those hollow projector things, and both of them needed the other one. They needed the help of the other one, but neither one of them would ask for that help because either they respected the other person or they just didn't want to admit that they needed the other person. And I just thought that was great, just to show their, how much they love each other and how much they respect the other one. But even though they needed, like Johnny could have really used Dutch's help, and Dutch really needed Johnny by her side, but neither one of them would ask for it. And I just thought that was just, it's showing another depth of the relationship between the two with the respect they show for each other and that. So I love that little bit that they showed us.
Yeah, what I thought was great about those scenes, too, was that even in the episodes where they weren't together, it was still showing how central and how important that relationship is for the show. Like, it still made everything that was going on at least a little bit about that relationship.
And I thought it was really great to see Davin and Dutch's relationship develop this season, too. I enjoyed when they kind of botched a mission together, when they destroyed whatever it was they destroyed, trying to get something back, and they're like, yeah, we did it, and Torrance like, no, you did not. you need more finesse than this. So I like that we had a clear friendship, buddy, teammate type of relationship in the beginning, but we're also seeing they're trying to repair sort of the romantic connection that they had back in season 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching the two of them, as you said, be the kind of like the bull in the china shop approach, and talk about how it would have been different if Johnny was here and how he would have looked at it. That's that team dynamic that they did such a great job of reminding us, even like you said, when it wasn't there, meaning that it wasn't all of them together to do it, that they all still appreciate what each other brings to the team.
Also, I think that's confirmation that Johnny is the mom friend, right?
You can
The
put it
two
that
just
way.
And behave.
The two just get out of control when he's
Yeah,
not there.
that's right.
Like, I
Someone's
doubt
gotta
either
whack
one of them
them.
would have been that bad on their own, but the two of them
them
together
together.
somehow just escalates the whole situation.
But now the big question is what's Dutch going to think when she finds out that Davin's had a baby with another woman?
I think she knows, doesn't she?
I'm pretty sure she does, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But she's going to use it against him. She's got to. Those lines are coming at some point when they end up, sitting around chatting over a drink. I mean, she's not going to miss an opportunity to zing him on that. Yeah.
Lines delivered with a smirk.
Big time.
Well, we've talked about Zeph a little bit, and I want to talk some about our beloved secondary characters, which have always been a very crucial part of Killjoys. What did y'all think about integrating Zeph into the team? Mark, we've kind of heard you talk about it. How about you, Kris? What did you and Kevin think about Zeph?
Zeph is so entertaining to me. I wasn't sure about her at first, because she's new. And it's like, but the team as it was, I love it so much. And I wasn't sure at first, but I ended up really loving her. Probably because one of her main characteristics was how much she loved Dutch.
Like, I can respect that.
I understand you, Zeph. I get it.
Yeah, to a certain degree, she was talking like the audience, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
She really was. And that was kind of fun. I loved how they threw the curveball at us when they did that episode with the simulation to try to basically, pick the new Johnny, almost. And even to the point of having an actor, Eric Knudsen was on Continuum, that looked like, to many of us who are longtime TV fans, I can pick out who's going to be the one they're going to pick. It's the pretty recognizable actor. And they didn't. They circumvented it. And Zeph kind of started to grow on me. Yeah, she was annoying as heck, but she was speaking what all of us were thinking, whether it was in terms of how she was approaching it or being way too caught up in the tech part of the solution and not the people impact of it. That it also made us appreciate Johnny's part in it, that he can do both. He can be, he can be annoyingly confident, but he knows that when he's doing something, he's thinking about the ripple effect of the people side of it. And she was just so caught up in the technology or computer side of it that it took a little while. And as you said, Kris, it was like at first, don't go messing with my 3, and then we had to kind of settle in and let that happen. But it was, like you said, Stephanie, though, I mean, there's such a great set of those secondary characters that they each have a nice part in what makes the story richer.
I just love the awkwardness of Zeph and her interactions with the other, especially all the sexual innuendos that she puts out. And, when she wants to she wants to test Davin and, telling him take his shirt off and or just the stuff.
Show me your nipples, I think is what she says to him.
And when she tells Johnny, I love you, and then no, well, not really, but it's just, I got a kick out of those. And I agree with Kris. At the beginning, I wasn't really sure about her, but the more that we saw her, the more I liked her and her whole thing. She's still not integrated into the team perfectly, but she's on her way, and I like her for that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very Killjoysy. We get this introduction of a new character, and I feel like on a lot of shows they might have stayed a bit more cardboard in the background, but she got a nice arc for the season where we really could see her grow and change as a person.
And talking about Dutch, hallowed be her name.
So another aspect of I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, and I was going to say, related to that, though, I really loved that we got more of Pre's background.
Mm-hmm.
You got that paid off. We got it teased earlier. And so like we talked about there, some shows that would have just been a little tease that he was a warlord. But no, we actually get to see it and go there with it, which was just wonderful to start seeing how rich that character is now, too, in terms of much more than what we saw at first behind the bar.
And I feel like there's not many shows that would take a male character who regularly wears false eyelashes and makeup and jewelry like he does and make him a warlord leading battles by the end of the season. It's just not something a lot of shows would do.
And
It's
even
true.
those that might, you could watch that and go, well, that's not, they only did it for fan service. I think it worked. I could totally see him in that role when he we saw him go back to see a lot of the folks he had to deal with. It seemed very natural.
Mm-hmm. What I loved is that they brought Garrett back, a character that we saw briefly just at the end of season 2 that I thought was like a one-time character, and we brought him back to be Pre's love interest. And the two of them are like, when you look at them individually, you just don't see it. You don't see the match between the two. But I think it was just so hilarious to see that relationship between them grow. And like towards the end, we were really rooting for them. And then, the whole connection and marriage and all that, I thought that was just great.
I mean, how can you not love a guy who loves to cuddle with puppies and knit them sweaters?
Yeah, the actors do a great job of creating that chemistry on screen. I mean, that's sometimes we always talk about, or you hear showrunners or writers talk about how you can put something on a page, but you can't force chemistry, and the two of them just make that work on very limited screen time too. This isn't like this is a main thing where there's a lot of time you can watch it develop. It just, as I said a little earlier, seemed very natural.
Another couple of our secondary characters who got a pretty healthy plotline this season was Turin and Fancy, and that storyline with the Cleansed. Mark, did you have thoughts about that this season?
Briefly on Turin, if there's ever been a character that has flipped and flopped throughout the seasons, when we first saw him, I hated that guy. And then all of a sudden he turned out, okay, he's actually a cool guy. Yeah, okay, he's on our side. And then all of a sudden I hated that guy again. And then all of a sudden he's back again. And then I hated him. It's like, I can't think of a single character that's done that so many times. And I don't know if it's going to keep going like that. But Turin is just one of those characters that from week to week, you just don't know. Am I going to like him this episode or am I not going to like him this episode? But overall, character-wise, I love the character. He's doing such a great job. As Kevin mentioned, the actors they have on this, they really embrace their roles, and he's doing a really good job. Now, Fancy Lee and the Cleanse, that's a completely different storyline. Not sure with the Cleanse, they have the whole being alienated because they were Hullen. Again, with Turin, that's another reasons why I turned on Turin again, is because of his treatment of Fancy Lee, and just how these Cleanse, they were shunned, they were locked up, they were put aside, and yet they were called upon whenever they were needed. And even Fancy, I mean, at some points he didn't, he turned his back on Turin, but at the end he came back. And the banter during that battle on the Rack ship, whenever the two of them, and even they're insulting each other as they're helping each other and passing clips back and forth and stuff like that. And I just thought that was good. So that's a good relationship. We talked about Pre and Garrett, but the Turin and Fancy relationship, even though it keeps, as I said, flipping and flopping, I think going forward, I think it's going to turn out to be a good one. I like the idea of the Cleansed, although, again, if the Cleanse are no longer Hullen, and that's the whole thing they're saying, we're now on the Killjoys side, but they are still capable of flying the ships. They were still required. So if they're no longer Hullen, is there some residual effect that still allows them to interact with the ships? And if that's the case, can they be trusted? And that's another question for me leading into season 4 is, even though we want to trust Fancy, can we? Is there still a possibility that the Cleanse can be used by the Hullen? And I'm not sure about that one.
Well, the control of the ships, just to make sure I'm being clear, the control of the ships, they were able to fly them because of, again, science hand wave, something that Johnny did so that the Davin was activating the ships to work. So the Hullen the Cleanse were just flying them.
But why did they require the Cleanse? Why couldn't anybody?
I assumed it was a matter of residual knowledge, not residual effects of the green.
Yes. I believe that's what was said in the show. He basically was like, you kind of have to have a feel for how they move, and the Cleanse remember how to fly them, even though they can't with these ones. They couldn't activate them without Davin's help. So how about you, Kris? What about Turin and Fancy and the Cleansed in that storyline?
Yeah, all the things that Mark said about Turin are fair, and I feel like the show wants you to feel like that. You know, he's just kind of that guy. It just sort of depends on what the situation is, you know, how you're going to feel about him, because he's going to be very specific and stuck in his ways, and it's either going to help you or it's not. And so, yeah, I'm glad that they gave him a solid storyline this season. I enjoy the character even when I'm frustrated by him. Fancy Lee, I'm also glad they gave him, you know, a solid storyline, stuff to do this season. I thought the Cleansed stuff is like classic Michelle Lovretta. You know, it's a group of people persecuted based on a thing that happened to them. There is a just circumstances of life. They are in this situation and are being treated a certain way for it. And Michelle Lovretta loves her class structures and sociological studies of that kind of thing. I'm into it.
Yeah, I thought when it comes to Turin, I was glad, as Mark pointed out, that once he flipped, he just kept flipping, so that he just became entertaining to see, you know, if he was going to be helping the team or not, and that everybody knew that he was doing it. So it wasn't one of these things sometimes with characters when you start to think you know where they are at in their relation to your quote-unquote heroes. If they start doing stuff against them, but it's somehow hidden, you have this thing like you don't like them for that reason, obviously. But the fact that everyone knew that he was just being an a-hole, basically, was like, fine. That's his niche. He's good at it. It's entertaining. Go for it. So I liked very much that Fancy called him on it, and that was his way to kind of deal with it. The Cleansed part is very, as Kris pointed out, it fits the story, but I'm not that engaged with it because it's still kind of just there.
Yeah, I feel like right now they're kind of a peripheral group that was useful, but they haven't really engaged with it very much yet.
Yeah, and it's hard to, because it's you know, I mean, we've got a little bit of it certainly with, you know, seeing how Fancy is doing some stuff or what's with Turin, but it's not quite engaged with it, but it's still okay because it's those secondary character parts of it that are more fun to watch.
I will say a piece of Turin's storyline that bothers me a little bit is that at the end of that episode where Fancy Lee gets, you know, held hostage by the Holland woman, and Turin wasn't 100% sure that he would be on their side. There's a scene at the end of that episode where Turin goes and apologizes to Fancy for kind of letting the other members of the Rack get into his head and convince him that Fancy couldn't be trusted. And, you know, Fancy calls him an a-hole essentially and walks away. But it felt like there Turin was willing to be like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. But then after that was when he imprisoned all of the Cleansed. That didn't quite jive for me. It felt a little too flip-floppy for me personally.
The one thing about Turin is whether he flips or flops, his intentions are always the best. He's looking out for the Rack. He's looking out for his people. We may not like what he's doing, but in his mind, that's what he's up to.
Right. So like we alluded to previously, we did lose one of our secondary characters this season. It was Alvis's turn to go. Kevin, how did you feel about that death of that character?
I thought it sucked. I was really liking him. Yeah. You know, I mean, I get it. It's the whole, you know, making the story real and hitting you in the gut. So, I mean, I say that just from a viewer's point of view, like he was really getting to be an entertaining part of the group. And also the way it happened with the whole not knowing that it was Anila and not Dutch. This is also me thinking about the Anila character and what this is going to mean going forward. And I'm not sure I can buy into her working with Dutch. And I don't want to use the word trust, but because, you know, she did that. Man, yeah. I mean, I get it. As a viewer of a show, I get why it happened, but it sucks because I was really digging Elvis and what he'd been able to help out the team with all along.
Yeah. To me, it was, I honestly didn't think he had died. I was expecting something. Because that scene was flipping and flopping. We saw right before that Dutch leave. I think she was at the Royale and she left and she was supposed to go meet somebody and she said, oh, hold on, I've got something to do. And then we cut to the scene with which we presume is Dutch showing up, but it's not. So I actually thought that in the next episode, Dutch was going to arrive there like seconds after and save him. Or something's going to be like Alvis being, the monk that he was, is used to getting cut and used to bleeding. So whatever Anila did to him wouldn't have as much effect on him because he's so used to it. But I was wrong. He ended up, he did die. Just interesting thing here. That episode, I hadn't seen that episode when it aired. And you Kris and Steph, you guys know Fred from the Netherlands?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Fred
came to Canada after Orphan Black finished. Fred came to Canada to do a tour of Orphan Black sets. He's a geneticist from the University of Rotterdam. He's a doctor there. So he's really into that sort of stuff. So he came to Canada to do that. And while he was in Canada, he hopped a train and came to see me. It's like a 3.5-hour train ride. And he came spend the afternoon with me. And I just came back from Podcast Movement. I hadn't seen this episode. So he had actually watched the episode already. But while he was visiting me, we went down and we watched the episode together. And it was funny because he was watching for my reaction. And I guess it was like, because again, I thought it was Dutch showing up. And Fred said I had quite the reaction on my face whenever I realized that it was Anila that stabbed him. So it was a pretty cool there. In hindsight, you look back and there are hints and there are clues that isn't Dutch whenever she shows up. But it took me completely by surprise. Now, Alvis was a great character. I was really sorry to see him go. Not that there is another character I would have wanted to go in his place. It was a good time, but I am going to miss him, especially the interactions with him and Dutch. Like the two of them had a special bond, different than the bond she has with anybody else. So I am going to miss him as a character.
And that's why I very much want to see her, meaning Dutch, deal with Anila with that in mind. Because, I mean, the word unforgivable comes to mind for me. So I'm wondering how they're going to do things going forward, since it looks like there's a pair up, team up, collaboration, whatever we want to call it. Because, all of us really were upset by losing what is very much a secondary character. So it's a great example. If it's hurting us, what's the impact going to be on Dutch?
I actually think this is potentially a good storyline if they do that, because now Anila has Dutch's memories and actually has memories of Alvis. So it might be interesting to see how Anila feels about it now, too.
And that's why I wonder if Anila and Dutch entering the green space, if now Dutch's memories of Alvis are there, and if that could be an opportunity to maybe show us a bit more of that relationship between Dutch and Alvis, because I feel like from the beginning we knew they had a history of some kind, but I don't know that we've ever really gotten a grasp of quite what that was. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could be something, I don't know, that could be explored possibly.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we got a lot of our great secondary characters this season. Got a good storyline for Pri and Torin and Fancy, new additions with Zeph. But I was wondering, who did we miss who've been around in the past but weren't here this season? How about you, Mark? Did you have somebody in particular that you thought you would have loved to have seen more of?
There's a few characters that we had in the past that we didn't really get to see, but one that we did see but not enough of, in my opinion, was Lucy. I mean, that ship in season 1 and season 2, Lucy was a lot of the comedic relief. She was a big help. She was the 4th member of the team. And I found in this season, we just didn't get that same. Yes, she was there. She had her presence when it was needed, but I think that's the difference. It was only when it was needed, where in the previous seasons, Lucy was there all the time. She would pipe in little comments when they might not necessarily be required, but they were fun. And we got a lot less of that this season. So I really like Lucy as a character, so I missed that. And I hope that in the next 2 seasons, we get more of her.
How about you, Kris?
I agree about Lucy. I am also very annoyed at the lack of Bellish. Because this feels like it would have been a good opportunity. They needed soldiers. It's been pretty well established that Bellish could have been very useful in a fight. And we didn't see her. Made me sad.
How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, the reduction of the Lucy interactions and such certainly was something I noticed. And again, I just have to my own selfish self, say, we're building the team, we're bringing in some other things going on. You know that the creators know how much we love her, so she's got to be back more in the coming seasons. So I'll just kind of put the pin in it that I understand, developing a show and the big story arc in the war maybe didn't have as much fun for one-off Lucy lines, but hoping that more of that is certainly back.
There's always time for one-off Lucy lines.
I know, right? Takes 2 seconds.
But as someone said earlier in our discussions, let's face it, we had the big war coming and everything else, so you can't keep cutting that with too many one-liners. It detracts from that being, that tension.
Building the drama.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing I did not appreciate, though, with Lucy is the fact that Zeph was able to lock Johnny out of Lucy. So I didn't appreciate that.
You hear that, Zeph? Mark has noted.
Yeah. He's gunning for you.
Yeah, I'll say she wasn't in previous seasons, but I really liked the introduction of Banyan Gray, and it bummed me out that she was killed off so quickly. Like, I understand the dramatic importance of Dutch confronting her and stabbing her even, and realizing, oh, I've made a horrible mistake, because I feel like that really shifted Dutch's projection for the rest of the season. But I don't know that she needed to die. I think it would have been enough if Dutch had stabbed her and Banyan had nearly died for her to kind of go through that same process. I wish she had stuck around more.
Yeah, good point.
Sigh.
So let's move into talking about some season 4 speculation or just questions we have going into the 4th season. We've talked about a lot of it already, but I think in thinking of the next couple of seasons, we need to keep in mind it is going to be a next couple of seasons, because we received the news that the show had been renewed for a season 4 and 5, and then that would be the end of the series, which I don't know about y'all. I'm okay with that. I think it's actually better with really tightly plotted storylines like this if the showrunners have an expected endpoint. But I was just kind of curious, what are some of y'all's big questions going into seasons 4 and then maybe even 5? Kris, why don't we start with you?
I think the big question, the big obvious question is who on Earth, who in the quad, pardon me, is the lady? Because they've spent so much time alluding to the lady, and I mean, obviously they set up the end of the season, setting up the 4th season, I should say, with them going to confront her in the green space. So, I mean, they have to answer this question next season, right?
One would hope.
No.
How many of us thought they had answered it this season? Because the lady we all thought was Anila.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the lady. And all of a sudden we find out, oh no, she's not the lady. She's actually a prisoner herself. So
that was a good reveal too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very curious with the 2-season renewal. I'm wondering now if this means that the lady and a lot of what's there is now going to get, not in a negative way, spread out over the 2 seasons, or if this means that Michelle Loretta and her team can fast track that storyline so we still have time for whatever else might have been bouncing around her brain for things they wanted to do before the series ended. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to be very curious in those first couple of episodes in the next season. Do we see this story bit really moving quickly, meaning that there is something else to come, or if we start filling it in, realizing that this will be the apex of what they're building to? So that's kind of what I'm wondering, because of those 2-season renewals and knowing that, in the way the world works from the television world in the U.S., we don't have to go into filler, quote unquote, stuff to get, because we don't know when we're going to get to an end. So I'm glad that we have a fixed point. I ultra confidence in the team that'll be writing it, but as a viewer, I'm fascinated and wondering what this means for bigger story bits that they probably had on that. What do we get to do over the course of the time in this series? Is there other stuff that they really want to get to, in which case they have to move this a little quicker or run it in parallel? That's really I'm spending more on that myself rather than the lady, even though it's big, is the bigger arc of what this means for the entire universe of what will become 5 seasons of Killjoys.
I was thinking at the end of this season, they've done this every season, right? Where they have one of our members of our team seem like they might be separated from the rest of the team at the end of the season. Like season 1, Davin was kidnapped. Season 2, Johnny went off with Clara. And now season 3, Dutch went into the green with Anila. So all those other times, they've resolved those pretty quickly, like the team being separated. And I don't like the idea of potentially Anila and Dutch fighting the lady in the green space for a really long time in season 4. So I am curious to see how quickly they will, if not kill the lady, but maybe resolve them being in the green space at least.
Mm-hmm.
I would say first of all, I loved whenever they announced that they were getting 2 more seasons and then it would be over. I thought that was great because at least then Michelle Lovretta and the rest of the writers have an endpoint. They can write the story they want to write and finish it off. So I am anticipating, like I'm much more excited about this series now, knowing that it will come to an actual end and not follow suit like Dark Matter did, where we're left to speculate what happened. But I'm thinking, and this is just my speculations, the lady is trapped in the green and she wants to come out. There's been some talk about her figuring things out. She knows that Dutch came out of the green, so she knows it's possible. I think that what's going to happen is for season 4, there's going to be a battle and all that. But then at the end of season 4, the lady's going to finally emerge from the green. And then we're going to have season 5 where the lady will be an actual being that controls all the Hull, and that it will be that will be the ultimate villain for the final season. So that's just my speculation. We're going to spend season 4 battling, but not making some progress, but not overall. I think the war will continue. I'm hoping to see more outside the quad. We know that the Hullen are all over the place from Johnny's map that he showed. So I'm hoping we're going to get more interaction and more stuff, especially the hack mods. We know that they were in a different sector. So we mentioned that earlier. Hope to get more of them. I'd love to see an entire hack mod army join the war on the good side. So
I'm also wondering if there's any connection between the Hullen and the hack mods. We saw a little bit of that this season about how Hullen technology was being used by one particular hack mod, but I wonder if there's any larger connection there.
Could be.
But I'm with you, Kevin. You were mentioning you had questions about this alliance between Dutch and Anila. I do think it's a very tenuous one. I think Dutch set it up that way, where it's very situation specific. But I do wonder how they're going to work together, knowing that, Anila killed Alvis, and then, if that situation with the lady gets resolved, where are they, like, what footing are they on in regards to the Hullen versus the human war in the quad? I'd have big questions about what's going to be the future of the war between the humans and the Hullen.
I'm curious what the three of you think on a question I want to throw out here for you folks is, do you see Anila as a character lasting through the rest of the series?
I hope so.
I don't. I think, personally, I think Anila is going to perish next season, because that was one of the big things, and one of the things I had a little bit of contention with is the whole Dutch saying that if she kills Anila, then she will die as well, and she was okay with that. She's going to go kill. I never understood that mindset. Why does killing Anila automatically end Dutch's life? I can understand where Dutch is coming from. It's the same thing as if you kill the green, the plasma, you're killing all the Hullen. But she was pulled out of a memory. She's a younger Anila before being Hullenized. But I wouldn't be surprised that maybe Dutch tries to sacrifice herself by killing Anila at some point, and then realizing that, oh, I'm still alive. And that's going to be part of it. Or maybe even the fact that Dutch has to come out of the green may create a gateway for the lady to come out afterwards. So I don't know. I
mean, it could be, but I don't think that Dutch's logic is unsound. Like, the premise that they've established makes sense with the information they have, to me.
Because Dutch was made from the green, so if you kill the green, she would die.
Kill the source of the green.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's her logic. But now that she's going back inside of it, could there be a loophole? I do like the idea of Dutch maybe trying to sacrifice herself and realizing that she doesn't die. But at the same time, I wouldn't mind Neela sticking around. But then there becomes a question of, can you redeem that character so that we are interested in her sticking around long term, given what we've seen that she's done?
But I feel like they've set the stage for that perfectly by giving her Dutch's memories.
That's true.
Because
possible.
A large part of her villainy that we've seen is because of not knowing these things. Granted, there's still the question of whether or not she's a sociopath, but, we'll see.
How do you feel about Neela sticking around, Kevin?
What I want to see, selfish Kevin viewer, which is different than maybe what's best for the show, is I would like to see a season 5, whether it's the whole season or a good part of it, be very much just about the 3 of our team, whether it's tackling the war or something. In other words, I enjoy the Neela stuff, but to me, a certain part of it feels like it's unfinished business. So I'm not sure I want it to last, the remaining 20 episodes. I would like to see that in some way wrapped up, or whatever it might be, whether it's Neela perishing or going off in the green to, I don't know, whatever, tackle something and Dutch comes out. But I mean, I do, at this point in my limited brain, think it would be fun to have the 3 of them doing something along with the core secondaries epically for season 5. And I'm just concerned that Neela, while fun and interesting, kind of can take away from that 3 part of the team.
The fact that both Neela and Dutch now share the memories. Dutch was given the memories when Zeph put the stuff in her head, and then Neela got Dutch's memories. Anyways, because the 2 of them now have shared memories, it means one of them is redundant in my head. You can kill one of them off, and the other one has the memories of both. Now, not that I want it to happen, but wouldn't it be interesting if Dutch was the one to actually die, and Neela? No. I know. I don't want this to. I don't want this to happen either, Kevin.
Take back.
Dutch died, and then Neela, because she now has Dutch's memories, could actually take over and become Dutch, and I don't know. As I said, not that I want it to happen, but it's a possibility. Go for it, Kris.
Okay, I have a crazy idea.
Oh, I love crazy ideas.
And I don't know if this is going to be a good thing or not, should this happen, but the possibility has me kind of excited. What if somehow, because now they share all the memories, well, except they don't, because Dutch doesn't have all of Neela's memories.
That's true.
But now that they've gone into the green, what if somehow they come out of the green as one person?
Turbo Dutch.
Then
Dutch
I'd be
Neela.
sad for Dulcea.
That's Neela.
I'd be sad for Dulcea at that point, but that's an interesting idea.
I don't know. Probably, right? I mean, I don't know. But, the world's most awkward threesome.
Oh, we are going to be so wrong, and we have to revisit this when we get to the end of season 4.
Feel free to laugh at us throughout the airing of season 4.
I mean, I can see that, that idea of it somehow creating a combination of the 2. I really can, because then I wouldn't, at least to myself, I wouldn't be as negative on Neela because of Alvis and, like you said, potentially being the sociopath. But I don't know, maybe I'm just being too simplistic when I say the Kevin approach rather than what the larger scale idea is of, what is it that Michelle Lovretta had in mind when they said, okay, you've got this series you're going to be able to do in several seasons. Where did she see this team being at the end of the run? I guess that's obviously what they're going to write towards. I'm not sure I have the ability to understand that scope yet.
I can see where you're coming from, though, Kevin, with wanting maybe the last season to focus primarily on Dutch, Davin, and Johnny. I share that. But I don't know. I feel like when it comes to Neela, I don't know that I like her, and so I don't like the idea of her being killed, written off, maybe. I'd probably miss her. But I I guess I don't know that she's necessary to stick around the entire rest of the series, but who knows what they're going to introduce in season 4.
Yeah, see, I think that's part of what will make the show interesting, is that we can't conceive of what changes are going to... I mean, could any of us have seen at the end of season 2 where we ended up at the end of season 3? So, so that's why I know we're all wrong. Although I'm sure we'll get little bits right. And that's a good thing. That's why we are fascinated with the show, because they constantly keep challenging us. So on the one hand, I like to emotionally feel like I say, no, Anila, it's bad. They're probably going to put something in here that's going to make me go, okay, fine, you proved me wrong again. And and appreciate that.
Who knows? Maybe they'll grab a whole bunch of different memories and they'll come out and there'll be like a dozen Dutches and Anilas around.
Oh, Dulcea would love that, wouldn't she?
Which one's
get
mine?
A Dutch. And you get a Dutch. Everybody gets a Dutch.
Go ahead, turn me down.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, she can just keep making moves on any of them. And go, okay, fine, I got another one. I'll keep going.
I was going to say, Dulcea's initial reaction is, wait, which one's mine? Wait, how many can I have?
Yeah. Fair point. Well, thank you all for joining us for this discussion. I had a lot of fun. Would y'all mind reintroducing yourselves, or telling people where we can find everybody's podcasts? Kevin, do you mind starting?
Sure. If you go to tuninginto.sci-fi-tv.com, you can find our podcast covering all the genre shows, as well as some other specific podcasts for things like Game of Thrones and Winona Earp and so forth.
You can find me at solotalkmedia.com, where I have podcasts for Killjoys, The Warrant is All. I also, as Kevin mentioned earlier, I do have a podcast for The Expanse. And like Kris and Steph, I just wrapped up my Orphan Black podcast. That one's done, but it's still there for you to look at or listen to if you want to.
And you can find Stephanie and me over at AskGenreTV.com, where you can find all of our podcasts, including ones for Killjoys called The Quad, as well as ones for Orphan Black and Lost Girl and various other things.
Well, thank you all again for joining us for this discussion. Hopefully we can do this again at the end of next season and laugh at how ridiculous we were when we were trying to speculate about what would happen.
Or how amazing it was that we were right.
That's right. That's right. You all listeners will be able to come back and go, aha, tell us what we got right, because we're going to probably forget knowing how much it's going to change.